And to discuss possible privacy laws and the ramifications of the UK phone hacking scandal, we're joined in the studio by Julian Disney, the chairman of the Australian Press Council. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
As you heard earlier, the UK media investigation is expanding now to include a vast range of newspapers and journalists in Britain which paid private investigators to steal personal information about targeted people from confidential databases. Can you be sure that kind of thing is not happening in Australia?
No, we can't. There are grounds for thinking it's perhaps likely to be worse in the United Kingdom than it is here, but that, of course, isn't by any means justification for being complacent. So it's always better to try and get in and prevent things gaining a foothold than it is just to wait until they have reached the outrageous level we've seen in the United Kingdom.
Have you heard of this kind of thing happening in Australia?
Yes, not from an enormous number of sources, but of course we also know that, leaving aside whether journalists are doing this, there's certainly been indications, I think, that other people are obtaining this kind of information by these kinds of methods. So that in itself would raise the worry that the practice may spread to journalists, even if it hasn't already.
I can tell you anecdotally that I've heard of journalists who pay private investigators in Australia to get personal information of this sort. I mean, have you heard that kind of allegation being made? I
have, and it's something we'll need to consider, and we'll need to... I think the challenge for a lot of this is to work out the right forum and the right level of initial response to it. There are a number of issues that need to be looked at, and we'll need to make sure that we don't just have a one-size-fits-all. When I say we, I'm not just talking about the Press Council, but the general people are concerned about the public good and about the strength of the media and the profession of journalism.
So what sort of inquiry should that be, looking into this kind of... It's not phone hacking. That's pretty serious, and you know, we don't know that anything like that has happened in Australia, but we can be pretty sure that paying for personal information has been going on.
Yes. I'm not too certain at the moment, frankly, what the best way of approaching this is. I think they'll certainly, if there's enough preliminary grounds for concern, and that's probably the first thing to find out by perhaps a number of different informal methods, what I am clear about is that if we're going to look seriously at an issue of this kind, it will need to be done by the police or by people who have coercive powers and the skills at doing it. There can be a mistake, I think, in believing that one body, whoever it may be, whether it's the Press Council or a statutory authority or whatever, can play all these roles. Most other professions and occupations, we use a range of different ways. Sometimes an element of self-regulation, sometimes a statutory authority, sometimes, of course, bringing in the police. So the challenge here will be to see to what extent is there grounds for putting priorities for resources into this area. There are a number of other important areas of media standards that need to be looked at, and if so, who should do it? Certainly I'm as concerned at the moment not only about how the information is obtained, but about the use to which information is put.
Yeah, well, we'll come to that issue in a minute, because that goes to whether there should be a privacy law, and I'll come to that momentarily. But the common feature here with the UK appears to be the use of private investigators, private detectives, to do the dirty work at arm's length. They're paid by media organisations. They then do the dirty work, it seems to me, by paying on to other people, officials and so on, to actually get this information. Is that where an investigation should focus? In fact, should there be an audit of all media organisations to find out how and why that they've used private detectives?
Well, of course, News Limited is looking now at the question of third-party payments, and the Press Council suggested to them, and they've agreed there should be independent assessors, and I've nominated the two really impeccably credentialed judges, and not just judges but people with experience in conducting inquiries. So the News Limited review will tell us something, and I've certainly always been of the view myself that if that threw up evidence of concern in News Limited, we would also need to think about other areas as well. But it's important to bear in mind that it takes two to tango, as it were, and so the holders of this information also need to do better. The people who are letting this information get out through their officers being corrupt or their methods being inadequate. To take the hacking, if the telephone companies had been more rigorous in the codes they'd used to protect security, we wouldn't have had this problem. Or it wouldn't have been as severe. If you take another problem, Facebook, which is a major problem in terms of privacy, if Facebook in fact had as their default systems, a much tighter approach, a lot of our problems would go away. So we need to look at that side, those who are holding the information, as well as those who are perhaps improperly obtaining it.
OK, you've talked about the News Limited investigation, but should it go further? I mean, after all, where do you think tabloid television gets the information to find people so quickly?
Well, and a key point about that is that really that's an example of how we need to move now towards regulatory systems which are across all media and across all platforms or devices. And the Convergence Review, which the government started, is looking at that, and the Press Council will be putting to them a proposal for a unified system which will not just consist of one regulator necessarily, but where there is a regulator exercising certain functions, they should go across all media. Because we certainly, this is because of it's occurring in print in the UK, much of the discussion is about print, but as a number of people, including myself, have pointed out, you could argue that in Australia at least, the perceived problems are at least as bad in radio and television. And we have, you know, coming down, well, it's a long way down the pike already, the problem of bloggers and other anonymous sources on the internet, which is a very big challenge for the future.
So briefly, you'd favour a broad investigation of the media, would you?
Well, we need a number of different approaches to different things. We've got hacking, we've got dishonest obtaining of information, we've got other issues that have been raised about ownership and diversity, we've got alleged political bias, we've got one thing that the Press Council especially will focus on, which is the reporting to fairness, accuracy, balance of reporting. That will be a major focus for us, and in particular specific standards. Broad general principles are of some use, but really to get good bang for your buck, to be really effective, you need to have specific standards and you need to have effective ongoing monitoring, and that's going to be a key focus for us, I think.
OK, we talk blithely about a right to privacy in Australia. No such thing exists in law. Should there be a tort of privacy?
Well, the Council has not taken a rigid view against it. I think it would be fair to say some members of the Council are not at all keen on it. Some are either neutral or perhaps mildly supportive of it. I think what is crucial is that if there is to be a general statutory right of privacy, the bar will need to be set fairly high, as it were, and the Australian Law Reform Commission did that, so it had to be a serious invasion of privacy, highly offensive to a reasonable person, and particularly in the balancing of whether there was a cause of action, strong emphasis on the importance of the public interest in freedom of expression.
But who will judge when that bar is overleapt?
Well, that's again where I think probably the strongest value in this area, whether it's as a sort of complement to a statutory right or whether it's something separate, is specific standards and particular contexts. To give an example, we're just about to publish rules about obtaining access to patients in hospitals and nursing homes. Now that will have some very specific things about the kind of approval you need to get, the kind of disclosure you need to make that you're a journalist, for example, the degree of informed consent that you need to get. Those sorts of things, specific rules about specific contexts, I think will often be of greater value than broad general principles or general rules.
Julian Disney, so much to talk about, so little time. As it turns out, we'll have to leave you there, but we'll come back to this issue as it unfolds. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.